So we've cleaned the head. We're going to, I already lapped a valve for the exhaust. I'm going to show you real quick lapping the valve for the intake. It's the same process. On the valve here, there's a seat. It's just that shiny area right there on the edge. I'm not sure if it's going to focus on it, but that has got to match with this right here, this edge right here, all the way around that valve, so that when the valve is closed, it's airtight and builds up compression. That was one of the reasons we did a leak down test. I know the intake valve was leaking. So we're gonna take our valve. I poured out some lapping compound, and I'm just gonna make a small bead of it around the edge, right on that seat where the valve's supposed to sit inside the head. And the lapping compound is like a 400 grit sandpaper, and it wears out as it sands the surface of the where the valve goes, the seat where the valve seats, and the valve itself, so it'll match perfectly. So we're going to take our valve, insert it into the valve guide, just like when we're going to assemble it. Slide the valve down. They make tools for this, little suction cup tools, but this one's, they have notches in them. So I found a washer that would fit into the intake and one that would fit into the exhaust in the intake this time, so that I could really get at it. The suction cups with that line in there don't really stay on there very well. So listen, kind of rough sounding, gets smoother as you go, and then there's no rough sound at all. It's smooth as can be. And that's it. Now it's lapped. So we'll remove it, clean off some of the, or all of the compound. You don't want that going in the engine. Then we're gonna clean up. You can see how nice and shiny that the, I don't know, light's not real good, but the seat is really nice and shiny. And it'll match perfectly with the seat on the head. So we should have a nice airtight fit for that. And that's it. You've lapped the valve. Congrats. So we're going to reassemble our head, freshly cleaned. Valves were lapped. We're going to start with the intake valve. So I've set out the parts here. Here is our intake valve, the arm that our rockers slides onto, springs, there's two of them, cap for the springs, and then the two keepers. We're going to be using the spring valve compressor to install these, and I'm going to be lubing everything with oil where they connect here, the arm on the valve itself before I insert it. The springs don't need any oil. Everything gets oiled in the motor. It's got all sorts of little holes and whatnot for oil to pass through and lubricate it when it's running, but we want to lube it while we put it together so it's not dry. Start off with oiling the intake valve. And we're just gonna make sure there's lube on there so it slides in nice. Goes right in the guide, slips right in. And we're gonna turn the motor over, and we're gonna start with our smaller spring. Goes on the inside. The larger spring, let's turn this around. See if you can see this. So there's the small valve, the small spring is in there. The larger spring, you can see it looks more compressed on the bottom. I've heard it doesn't matter. Other people say the more compressed side should go down. So that's what I'm gonna do. Drops right in there. Next piece is the cap that goes over the springs. And now we're going to compress this. and we're gonna install the keepers. All right, let's see if I can get this on this angle so you can see. I've got my valve spring compressor seated against the intake valve there. And it's not gonna, I'm gonna have to do it off the side of the bench here, or the kitchen table. The valve might slide out the bottom when it's upright like this, but it shouldn't go all the way out. If it does, you probably need new valve stem guides. Let's see where that's at. And you can see, I don't know if you can, but it's right on that valve, so I'm gonna go ahead and tighten it up. And you can see it's compressing the spring. Let me see if I can show that to you. There's the spring, or the back end of the valve, and as I tighten, you can see it's pushing the spring down so that more and more of that valve stem is exposed. And what we're gonna do is slide our keepers in there, and that is a chore. So I'm gonna put this on time lapse, I think. All right, so I went ahead and installed the exhaust side just the same way I did the intake. It didn't go in as easily. One side of the one keeper stayed lower than the other. So at that point, I just screwed it in to add pressure to the spring and released it. I did about 4 times, and eventually both keepers matched up. So that's the exhaust. Springs are under there, but those are the keepers on the top of the valve. And here's the intake keepers on top of the valve. That's it. Next step on assembling the head are going to be these rocker arms, and they're on these shafts right here. You can see there's a little notch out of it, and that's for one of the head bolts to pass through. This one's the intake. I don't know that it matters, but I kept track of them that way. We're going to put a little bit of oil on there, make everything go together smoother. And then we will slide the rocker inside the intake here, and the tappet adjustment, little nut and everything, that goes over the valve stem. So I want to make sure it goes in this way, orient it this way, slides in, and then work it into the head, and then we guide this shaft in through here, and I'll show you that on the next one from the other side so you can see what I'm doing. And it goes right in there. I'll line these up. Okay. Here's the head from the other side. I wanted you to see how this is gonna happen. We have the rocker arm, tappet adjustment here, goes in the engine this way. And I'm definitely not gonna be able to do this one-handed, but you can see that hole right there is where the shaft to hold the rocker arm is. And you see it line up right there. Once I get that lined up with one hand, I'll insert that with the other, and it'll look like that. Intake, exhaust. Next up here is to install this bracket. It's bolts in right there. Basically, both ends of this prevent these arms from spinning. And you can see it fits right in here. So it goes right in here. And then these sides of these arms prevent that shaft from moving. And it's just connected with a 10mm bolt. If I can get that. Definitely not a one-handed job because it moves. So I'm going to get my driver. All right, so that clip's installed. I think the manual calls for 8 foot-pounds of torque. I don't care, I just tighten it down a little bit. 8 foot-pounds is not too much. So next we're going to install the cam we'll get to that now. As with the other parts, I applied oil to the cam so that everything goes together smoothly. And if you remember when they disassembled it, it has to go in this orientation where this lobe on the cam goes through this notch and this lobe goes through that notch. Once you're in, you spin it all the way around and then you should be able to feed the other end of the cam right in there. Okay, let's see how this goes one-handed. I think I'm gonna need 2 hands. All right, so the last step is really straightforward. You just take your rocker covers, screw them on. But we're waiting on some O-ring, or not O-rings, I apologize, rings for the piston rings that are supposed to be here in a week or so. So I'm gonna post this video up. That's your top with the lap valves. We could do a leak down test now on this. I'm confident it's not gonna need it, so I'm not gonna worry about it. Stay tuned. Like, share, and follow.